This is a full flow state guide, so for anyone who wants to be a more productive person, this video is the best video you could possibly watch for improving how much work you get done when you do sit down and work, if you get distracted, if you procrastinate. This video will probably help you with all those things. So the first thing to understand before we go any further is what actually is flow state. You've probably heard the word flow state or getting in the zone, anything like that. That's the question I'm going to answer first. So flow state is essentially when 100% of your focus is on the task in front of you. So for example, I'm recording this video right now. I don't have any other thoughts in my head. I don't have any distractions. I am 100% focused on this recording. And the good thing about flow state is it is essentially when you're going to get the most done. If you're task switching and you're distracted, thinking about other things, you're just not going to do as well. Anyone who has made a speech before, or who is writing a book, or any kind of studying, which is basically everyone, any kind of deep knowledge work, you probably know that there are days when you're completely in the zone, locked in, the time just flies by, it simply passes by. And then there are other days when the time goes really slow, you're constantly getting other thoughts, getting distracted, you're having to use discipline to keep yourself there. That is the power of flow state. Though that stuff doesn't happen when you're actually into flow state. And if you want to be the most productive, efficient possible person, you actually need to master flow state, because it is the most productive state you will ever be in. A word I'm going to use in this video, probably a fair bit, is monastic focus. What that basically means is monk-like focus. That's what I'm going to teach you when we talk about flow state. So one final thing before we get into the actual meat of this video, think about your goals for a second. You can pause the video and have a think for a second, but I guarantee you, whether it's fitness, whether it's studying related, whether it's, you're producing something, like you're producing YouTube content or you're writing a book, it could be YouTube, it could be charity, it could be any kind of self-development, it could even be a bucket list of things. Most of those probably incorporate some kind of flow state, even with things like the gym. Like, I personally have a really bad habit of getting distracted sometimes and checking my phone, and flow state stops me from doing that, because when I do that, it kind of derails the momentum a little bit. And actually, I said that was the final thing I'll say. The actual final thing I'll say is that flow state is harder than ever to get into, which is what we'll talk about in this video. So here is a brief sort of summary of what we're going to cover. So we've already covered the importance of flow state. Next, I'm going to talk about how to get into flow state. Then I'm going to talk about removing obstacles to flow state, which is a very, very important section, especially these days with social media. And in fact, that's the most obvious obstacle, but there are other things that you probably haven't even considered. And then I'm also going to talk about productivity in a nutshell, because everyone who is watching this video is obviously interested in improving their productivity. You're interested in getting more gains in the gym, or, writing more words per minute, whatever your standard of productivity is. We're going to tie flow state into that. But guys, before we go any further, a lot of you watching these videos aren't even subscribed, and I'd really, really appreciate if you could just scroll down right now, hit the subscribe button. I've also got a main channel, which you should definitely check out. I've got way, way more videos on that, but that's the last time I'll say it. Let's get straight into the video. So the first and most important, not most important, but I guess it is the most important if you're talking about how to actually achieve flow state, is how do you actually get into flow state. And there's a lot of, I did a bit of research for this video, found a lot of graphs and a lot of YouTube shorts and all kinds of stuff, and it's all kind of just one confusing mess. So I've just taken the tip of the iceberg, the stuff that's actually important, and thrown it into this PowerPoint. So to get into flow state, into optimal 100% monastic focus, you essentially need three things. You need a task, you need time, and you need temperament. So essentially, here's what you need to do. First, you need a clear goal. The mistake some people make, and a mistake that I used to make, and I'm proud to say I don't really make anymore, is they will sit down, they will open their laptop, or they'll open their, university books or anything like that, and they just don't really know what they're actually supposed to be doing. They have a vague idea that they're going to be productive. They have a concept of studying or, working on the business or anything like that, but they don't actually have a clear goal. Big mistake. You need to actually remove the obstacle of you having to decide what to do while you're doing it. You need to have a clear goal in mind. So as soon as you sit down, or as soon as I sit down at my laptop, I immediately decide, or I look at my notes that I've already got written down. I go, okay, I'm working on this. I don't sit down and just start going through random stuff, checking emails and opening it. That doesn't work. That's a really, really bad idea. You need a clear task that you're working towards. When I'm writing my novel or my ebook, I'm writing two books at the moment, I sit down and I know I am doing this right now. And that probably sounds more obvious than useful, but I guarantee you, just before you think, oh, that's too obvious, actually have an audit of your behavior. Think about the kind of things that you've done in the last week. When you've gone to the gym, do you actually know what you're training? Do you go through and you know exactly what you're doing? When you open your books, do you know exactly what you're studying? Because that's extremely important. I'll also say the next thing is what I call time. So you need to know exactly how much time you're studying for. A mistake some people make is they just sit down, they kind of work, and then they, do a few minutes and they stop here and there, and they don't actually organize it into their schedule either. They just kind of do it when they can. That's another mistake. And trust me, guys, I do understand that like sometimes you don't feel like it. Sometimes you feel kind of motivated to do stuff. That's important. I get that, right? But it is a mistake to think that you can just open your laptop, work for a few minutes, stop, and then, go check some other stuff and then come back and do this. That's a really disorganized way to do it. I know there's been a lot of really bad advice about working for 15 minutes and taking a 5-minute break. I don't think anyone who is really productive actually does that. That sounds like kind of bullshit, like it just sounds like absolute rubbish. The most productive people are very, very disciplined, and they have very good focus that they've trained because they don't do a bunch of bad habits that we'll talk about later in the video. And they are essentially able to just sit there and work for anywhere from, 45 minutes is pretty low, anywhere from like 1 to a couple of hours. I know that when I'm writing my book, unless I've got something like I need to do, like I'm going to leave the house in an hour, I will usually sit there from anywhere from 1 to 3 hours, and I'll just smash it out. Maybe every hour I'll take a few minutes break to go to the bathroom or whatever, but honestly, I have my water bottle next to me, so there isn't really a reason to take a break. That is going to be when you're the most productive state possible, is when you actually have consistent times, you sit down and do stuff, you plan it into your schedule, and you lock in and do nothing else. Something else I should have mentioned actually that ties into task is the Jerry Seinfeld technique. We've probably all heard of Jerry Seinfeld, but he is actually famous for being quite productive. Something he would do when he used to write his jokes, you probably heard of the show Seinfeld, was that he would sit down with a pen and paper or whatever, and he would tell himself he doesn't have to write jokes, but he can't do anything else. So essentially he would sit there and he would only do that. And whenever he got the urge to do something else, he would just discipline himself and not do it. And that's definitely something that you can learn from, because I know for a fact that whether it's the gym or whether it's writing a book or anything, I know for a fact that you don't just do that. I know you get distracted. I know you go on Instagram and scroll when you're on the gym and it sort of derails your motivation. I know when you're working on your laptop, you open random tabs and start Googling stuff and looking up stuff on YouTube. I know you do that because that's how I used to be. And that's really not good for you. It's derailing you. You might think that it's only costing you a few seconds. It's not. The average amount of time it takes to actually fully bring your focus back is 17 minutes. So don't think, and probably within that 17 minutes, you've gone and done it again. So you've basically just derailed your productivity. So please bear that in mind. Do not do anything but the task you're doing. I know what you're going to say. What if I want to Google something and I don't want to forget it? I understand that. So what I personally do is I have a notepad next to me on my desk. I haven't put a picture of it in this video, but I basically just have a notepad sitting next to me. And if I get a really good idea for maybe a YouTube video or something that's actually really important and I don't want to forget it, I'll just write it down real quick and come back. That's actually okay because you're not using technology in a way that isn't good. I think when it's technical, that's pretty bad. Like when you're going through social media apps and that kind of thing, that's not good at all. But what was I going to say? Had a mind blank for a second. What were we talking about? That's all right. Sorry, I just had a complete derailing of the train of thought. Having a notepad next to you is probably the best way to do it. If you're in a gym and you don't really have a notepad next to you, you can just open iPhone notes and write something down there as well. But that is task and time out of the way. The third thing is temperament, and that's probably the word out of the three that you don't really understand. Temperament, I could have just said like emotional state. I just wanted to pick another word that started with T. Temperament just means sort of like the mental gear that you're in. So we all go through different mental gears throughout the day. You probably know that when you wake up early in the morning, you're sleepy. Before you go to bed, you're a bit sleepy. Hopefully, unless you've been drinking a lot of caffeine. After you eat a big meal, especially carbs, you probably don't feel like studying that much and it's difficult to focus. That's sort of like more of the rest and digest mode. We all know that sometimes you feel like absolutely annihilating a workout, or you sit down and study and you just absolutely crush it, the time breezes by. That's kind of like a war mode where you're like very high dopamine, very focused working. And then there are other times when you like just go from bad habit to bad habit and none of it really scratches the itch. And then there are also times where you're kind of like ADHD, spazzing between things, opening every single tab of stuff that you need to do at once and going through it all. Like you can't really stay focused. You're just kind of chasing the next task. There's all these kind of different mental gears, right? And what you've got to understand is that flow state is kind of its own mental gear. You kind of need to be in the actual, you need to be in the zone if you want to actually get into flow state. So a mistake I see a lot of people make is they just do weird things that kind of take them out of the temperate they need to be in flow state. One of them is distractions. So if you've got your phone next to you buzzing notifications, if you're scrolling through stuff, if you're even thinking about other things, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to actually be in flow state. I'm going to skip forward to this tip here, which is practice mindfulness, because this is really, really important for temperament. So pay attention. Mindfulness, if you don't know, is basically the state of focusing on one thing. If you've ever heard of the phrase being mindful, that's what it means. It kind of relates back to meditation. So if you ever hear me talking about the meditation principle in air quotes, I'm basically talking about mindfulness. What it is the idea that if you're focusing on something and you get distracted, say I get a thought about something else, I don't have to like start thinking about that. I can actually manually, deliberately bring my focus back to what I'm doing. So a few times when I've recorded this, I've just got a random thought about something else, what I'm going to do after, oh, I could do this, that, and the other. Whenever I get a random thought like that, I basically just bring my focus immediately back to what I'm doing. You actually can do that. A lot of people might not realize that, but you can bring your focus back to the present and what you're actually working on. And the more you do that, you actually sort of train your focus like a muscle. And the reason it's called the meditation principle is because when you're meditating, you focus on one thing, like your breath, and whenever you get a random thought, you just bring it back to that and focus. Meditation as well, I'd highly recommend that if you want to improve your focus. But yeah, just remember that you don't actually have to, if you think about something, you don't actually have to get angry and emotional and do that thing. If you get the urge to open a tab and Google something, you don't actually have to do that immediately. You can just bring your focus back and focus on what you're doing. And I understand you might feel a degree of anxiety that you're going to forget something, which is why I told you about the notebook, or that, it's important. You need to check your phone. You need to have it next to you buzzing notifications in case there's an emergency. First of all, let me tell you, if there's an emergency, they can call the police. Nope. This sounds rude, but nobody's calling you if there's an emergency, right? Like, unless obviously if you have children, that's probably the exception. You might need a phone, but if your children even have access to a phone, they're probably old enough where it's not as big of a deal. And also, it's highly unlikely they're actually going to have to message you. So don't make the mistake of having your phone next to you, buzzing Instagram notifications and that kind of thing. Terrible idea. Remove distractions. As far as being in sort of like war mode, flow state, high dopamine, high focus, you need to make sure you're not accidentally slipping into any other state. So obviously, 1, practice mindfulness. 2, if you're getting into work first thing when you wake up, a lot of people like to wake up and exercise straight away or study straight away. Very, very good habit, by the way. But a mistake that a lot of people make is that when they wake up, they don't actually get out of sort of sleepy, restful mode. What you need to understand is that when you wake up, the only thing that's actually making you wake up and making you stop being sleepy is your body actually releases a hormone called I can't remember if it's adrenaline or cortisol, but it releases one of them when you see sunlight to actually wake you up. Like, we're an animal that is awake during the day, right? So when you see sunlight, your body it gives you a cortisol shot to actually wake you up and make you focus. The problem is that because we don't live outdoors anymore, we're in very, very comfy, air-conditioned, soft, optimized rooms, with someone else who's also sleeping. You've got the blinds down, it's dark. That, although it's very, very comfy and it's good for while you're sleeping, for optimizing your sleep, it's not good for waking you up in the morning. So you can kind of experiment with this if you want. You can experiment with, I don't personally do this, but you can have automatic blinds that wake up at a certain time. You can have a lamp in a room with a, time programmed in it. So it actually, a lot of people have an alarm clock, but you can actually have an alarm light as well that slowly lights up until it's, filled your room with warm lights that wakes you up. If you're not going to do any of that, just bear in mind that when you wake up, if you still feel sleepy, you don't actually have to stay in bed. Just tell yourself, instead of thinking about sleep, manually pull your focus onto the task that you're supposed to do first thing in the morning, and just tell yourself that 2 minutes from now you can be awake. I think a lot of people don't want to get out of bed because they think that it's going to be painful, they're still going to be tired. Tell yourself that 2 minutes from now you can feel awake. It just takes 2 minutes, 120 seconds, and you can go from feeling sleepy to feeling awake. And that's all you need to do. And once you actually start doing that over and over, it becomes easier because you can remember the past. You understand that it's only really going to take 2 minutes after you get out of bed and you go outside, look into sunlight, start moving around, you're going to actually wake up. So just remember that as well. But that's how to actually get into flow state. If you do all those things, you focus on the task, you eliminate distractions, you make sure you're in war mode, high dopamine, you're not like sleepy or anything like that, you haven't just eaten, I'd recommend you stay fasted. If you incorporate all those things, you will get into flow state. I'm just going to show you, these are the 2 the two most useful graphs I saw. We're not going to go through everything in them, but I'm just going to point out some of the most important things. The challenge skill ratio I thought was really interesting. This kind of suggests that flow state is the balance between something that's challenging, but you also have the skills to do it. If it's too easy, you get bored. If it's too difficult, you get anxious. I think that's a pretty interesting concept, and I do think you should push yourself when you're working. So like, I already talked about when you get distracted, you should manually bring your focus back. That would be incorporating elements of challenge. And then of course, what you're working on should be authentic to you. So whether it's fitness or studying, obviously it has some kind of intrinsic and extrinsic value. So it's going to keep you from getting bored because it is important, but it's authentic to you. So you're going to be interested. You're not going to feel anxious because, there's too much stuff. And if you do feel anxious, you probably just need to keep doing it. Like it's normal to get a bit of anxiety in the gym, especially if you're new, so don't worry about that either. This graph, I had seen this before. I think I might have seen this once before. I thought this was really interesting as well. It's kind of like, it's a little bit like Ikigai, the book, which I'd recommend you check out if you want, but it's kind of combining 4 different elements. It's less about getting into flow state, and it's more about what task you should pick to be your flow state task, if you know what I mean. So it just suggests something you care about, something that has a long-term goal that, it's going to benefit you in the long term, something sufficiently challenging and something you're actually good at. I don't think something you're good at is really that important, because to get good at something, you actually have to work on it. So maybe replace that with something that you aim to get good at, something you're trying to improve in the present. That's probably not the best terminology there. But yeah, if you can incorporate all of those things, you basically land in flow state. You're working on fulfilling long-term tasks that's challenging. You have to put effort in, and you're highly rewarded by it. That's, I think, a really good lesson. You can pause the video and look at that if you want, but I'm not going to stay on it any longer. So that's flow state, how to actually get into it, that done, out of the way. But it's very, very important that you understand how to remove obstacles, because these things will kill you, especially these days. They will kill your productivity. You need to understand that if you don't pay attention here, you are essentially not going to get into flow state because of a bunch of other stuff. So this isn't a normal video. This is more an advanced guide. I'm just going to go through all of these things, boom, 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 and show you how to stay in productivity. So you might want to mark specific points of this video. You might want to check the description below where I've got timestamps and revisit this if you've got a specific problem, but let's just go through them. So first, scheduled versus unscheduled. We already talked about that a little bit with time, but I'm a big believer in scheduled learning, scheduled stuff. So for me personally, I actually am a little bit of a psychopath. I have a habit tracker stuck to my desk. I have my routine, my daily routine stuck to my desk, like when I exercise, when I eat, etc. I have my yearly goals, my monthly goals, and my weekly goals stuck to my desk. And then I also mentioned I just have like a little notebook checklist where I can just, not doodle. I was going to say like doodle, but I'm not going to do that on it. I'm going to like write down any thoughts that I get and that kind of important stuff. I have all of that on my desk, and I actually plan in my calendar what tasks I have to do each day. Am I recording this video? Am I editing this video? What am I training in the gym? Is it back, legs, upper body? Am I doing chest and tries? All of that kind of stuff. I plan that into my calendar. I still leave, moments for sort of sporadic, what's the word I'm looking for? Spontaneous stuff, like if I want to hang out with friends. I don't plan that to the minute, obviously. I'm not a fucking dickhead. But I do actually plan my days out a bit. And I think everyone could benefit from planning their days a little bit more, even if it just means having a habit tracker where you have a few habits like, journal, stay off social media for the first half of the day, eat one healthy meal, go for a 20-minute run, just stuff like that. We can all benefit from planning that stuff into our schedule. We can all benefit from setting one goal each day. If there's something you're very, very bad with, like going to sleep at a particular time, or maybe you stay in the house too much and you need to talk to people, just putting that into a habit tracker and sticking it to your desk or having it digitally on your laptop, that can actually change your mind. So what I'd highly recommend is you don't need to worry about going into, Ali Abdaal. Honestly, you don't have to worry about going into Ethan Ward productivity. You don't have to worry about going that far. My prescription for you would be just find one thing and be 1% more productive in it. Just give yourself, if life was a video game, give yourself one bonus productivity point. So like you go up one level, one sort of like, XP in productivity, find one thing and upgrade your life in that regard. I've got other videos on that, but you can make a habit tracker. You can set one daily goal and check it. You can plan your exercise. Just do stuff like that. That I'd recommend you do that. The next thing we're going to talk about is task switching. And this is extremely important because every single person does this, including me. So if I'm doing this, you definitely need to pay attention. What task switching actually is it's basically where you're doing something like, it could be recording a video, probably not recording a video, bad example. You could be doing something like studying, for example, and then you open another tab and you start, Googling this thing, or you open your phone and you start, doing your daily Duolingo, just random things like that. It can even be productive task switching, like you're switching from one productive task to another and then back to the first one, etc. But that's a very, very bad way to work because of a thing called attention residue. Essentially, when you're doing deep work, you're in flow state, monastic focus on something, and you switch from that task to another task. You don't actually pull all of your attention over, you leave some of it on the first task. And as you can imagine, if you're consistently switching from task to task, it's kind of like you're building up attention residue like plaque on all of those previous tasks, and you're not as productive as you could be, and it's been scientifically proven. So you might think for a second, no, that's not me, I'm the exception. I can switch between tasks, I can multitask, I can do all this kind of stuff. You can't, trust me. And when you stop doing that, you will one day make a mistake and you will realize how much that was costing you. You just don't actually have the juxtaposition or the hindsight to see how much damage that's doing. So the only time I would tell you can actually multitask is if you're habit stacking. So for example, if you're going for a run, a walk, or exercise, you can listen to a podcast or music at the same time. That's obviously fine. If you're waiting for something to complete, like for example, something's downloading onto your laptop, it's going to take 3 minutes. You don't have to just sit there bored. You can do something else. Make it productive. Don't scroll or anything like that. If you're waiting for the kettle to boil, you could maybe answer some emails. That might be a good time. That kind of thing. Just make sure you're being smart about it. It is okay to habit stack and to do multiple productive things at the same time. It is not okay to switch between various deep work tasks back and forth. It is not good to do that, especially if you're switching from a task like studying to checking emails to planning your calendar. That's what we call shallow work. Deep work is things that require deep monastic focus. They require intelligence, they require flow state, and they benefit from all of that. So things like recording a YouTube video right now, perfect example of deep work. Studying, writing a book, language learning, exercise, all those things. It's kind of easier to get into flow state with exercise because you're doing something physical. It's more cognitive stuff that's difficult. But all of that stuff is called deep work. There's actually a fantastic book I'd recommend you check out called Deep Work by Newport. I'll try and link it in the description below. But essentially, all of that stuff is deep work. Shallow work is things like checking emails, responding to text messages, planning your calendar, just sort of like stuff that you can do without even paying attention, brain dead, low ROI, just kind of essentials, admin tasks, that kind of thing. Shallow work is not a good thing to deviate, especially when you're in the middle of your deep work, because it's just distracting and that kind of thing. And I understand why you want to check your emails and stuff in the middle of work. That's because our brain is actually designed to chase easy wins. We like the idea of switching to emails, checking that, and then we can tick off one box for the day. We feel productive. I get that. What you need to recognize is that's just your evolutionary programming, and it's not actually going to benefit you in this modern digital age. You need to overwrite that with discipline and mindfulness and stay focused on the deep work. But the next question you have from that is pretty natural. You're probably saying, well, okay, I won't check my emails in the middle of studying. When should I do it? Because it's important. I need to check my emails. I need to plan my calendar. I need to set my bedtime alarm, like my morning alarm, that kind of stuff. Yes, you do. I understand that. That's all shallow work, and it is important. So what you should do is follow this system, either eliminate, delegate, or batch. So as far as, you just need to basically go through these three things, and if you can't do the first two, you just do the third one for each shallow work task. So the first thing you can do is eliminate. If you're checking your emails 7 times a day, you probably don't need to do that. Eliminate 6 and reduce it to 1. That's elimination in a nutshell. It's good for bad habits, things like, checking your social media. You shouldn't be checking it first thing especially, but you don't need to check it 10 to 20 times a day. I think the average person checks it a few times an hour. Don't do that. So just eliminate almost virtually all of that, right? Elimination is the first step. Ask yourself with each shallow work task, you can actually do an actionable step right now. Pause the video if you really want advanced results, and make a list of all the shallow work tasks you do on a day-to-day basis, and just put like an E next to every single one that you can either completely eliminate, or you can eliminate like 99% of it. Like for example, I used to check my social media like, probably 20, 30, 40 times a day, like whatever a normal person does. And I've just eliminated basically all of that. Like I check it, twice a day in the afternoon, and then obviously I check YouTube, not even that much. Like I only check it when I need to for business reasons, and like just to see how a video is performing. But yeah, I've basically eliminated most of that. Second thing you can do is delegate. This is probably the one that the least of you will be able to do, but for example, if you're in business, you can delegate YouTube video editing and that kind of thing. So just if you're in more of an advanced industry, ask yourself what you can delegate. But there's actually ways to delegate a lot of things. So for example, if you are designing flashcards for language learning. Designing the flashcards isn't actually that useful. It's doing the flashcards that's important. But if you can use an app like Anki or StudyStack and download somebody else's flashcards on the same topic, that's actually sort of delegation. You're just taking somebody else's work, which is really useful. And you can look over somebody else's notes. In school, you can, if you need to prepare a PowerPoint and you're working in a team, you can each do part of it instead of doing the whole thing, etc. Just ask yourself, for delegation, ask yourself, look at the remaining shallow work tasks and just ask yourself, has somebody else done this that I can take? Could I get somebody else to do this for me in a way that would be advantageous, etc.? That's delegation. And the final thing you should do for shallow work tasks that you personally need to do, like for example, I was going to say like planning your day, checking your emails, that kind of stuff. Just batch it. So basically do all of it at the same time. So if you need to check your emails, you need to plan tomorrow, you need to, respond to some messages, that kind of thing. Just do all of it at the same time, and that kind of leads to the least amount of attention residue being left behind. So what I do is I actually plan a shallow work block each day, and if I need to, book a doctor's appointment, or I need to book a blood donation appointment, because I do that, for example, I just do all of that at the same time. I just allocate 20, 30 minutes, or, honestly, even less than that. I just go boom, 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 knock all of that out at the same time. I don't want people to think I only learn languages from Duolingo. I don't. I just keep a streak because I personally like to. It makes me happy, and if something makes you happy, do it, unless it's bad for you. So I'll do one Duolingo lesson, then I'll do, I've got the Headway app, which summarizes books, so I do one every day, just like 10 to 15 minutes on that. I'll do that in my shallow work block, and I'll just knock all that out, boom, boom, boom. The best time to do that is probably, after eating, when you've just, had some carbs or something like that, because you're not going to be able to focus on deep work anyway. So you can see, the advice I'm giving you is just a little bit like logistical. It's a little bit like playing chess. You're just trying to move all the pieces into the position that's going to be best for you, and it's ultimately going to lead to, a metaphorical checkmate, which is, the best possible life for you. But moving on to something very, very important, your focus is conditioned to be shit. So I want you to pay attention to this picture here. This is a bookcase. If you watch my main channel, you probably have seen this in the back of my room. I actually have a much, much bigger bookcase. I just took a photo of this one. This used to be entertainment. I'm not just showing you this for the fun of it, but yeah, got Sherlock Holmes there. That's kind of cool. This used to be entertainment. So imagine your great grandfather, for example. He used to just read books like this. This would be the fun part of his day, or he'd literally just smoke a cigar and sit there. I'm not recommending smoking, but he would like smoke a cigar and just sit there for 2 hours just thinking. Can you imagine anyone doing that? Like, very few people read books these days. It's actually kind of concerning. And that's because of a thing called CFE, competing forms of entertainment. Nobody does this anymore. What they do now is they go on social media, they swipe through Instagram, TikTok, YouTube Shorts, they watch absolute bullshit, they watch, clips of like Mr. Beast content, not to shit on him or anything, like obviously I respect his channel, he's come a long way, but just like they watch stuff that isn't actually useful for their life. It's just kind of, it's not even fun really most of the time, it's just like slop. They just like swipe through short form content and stuff that isn't particularly enjoyable. And the problem with that is it does actually come with consequences if you didn't know. It's very, very bad for you. It's been proven. What that does when you're watching short after short after short is it actually conditions your focus to be shit. And the reason it does that is because of a hormone called dopamine. You actually have 3 main hormones that control your focus: dopamine, epinephrine, and acetylcholine. But the one we're going to focus on here is dopamine. I'll actually link an Andrew Huberman episode. He's like a neuroscientist guy to do with focus in the description, because if you're interested in that kind of stuff, you'll probably be interested in his podcast as well. But essentially our focus has been conditioned to be shit through short form content, because your brain uses a hormone called dopamine, which is the motivation hormone, to motivate you to do stuff. And when you swipe through short form content, it conditions your brain through a process called neuroadaptation to expect very, very quick hits of dopamine, right? When you're swiping through short form content. So as you can imagine, when you try and read or something long form like that, it's very difficult. You lose focus immediately. A lot of people have ADHD-like tendencies when they don't actually have ADHD. Like if you put 1,000 random people, if you put this book in their hand, right, like a Sherlock Holmes book, it's a bit old, so maybe not the best example because it's from like 1890, so the language might be a bit boring, but if you put like a novel in most people's hands, they would probably lose focus within the first 10 to 15 seconds. Like most people, they literally, their eyes glaze over, they can't focus. Have you ever seen that, like experienced that, where you reread the same line, you get distracted, you're thinking about other stuff, you have to pull your focus back and then you shut the book and do something else? That is very, very common for people, and it's not really because they have ADHD. It's just because they've conditioned themselves to have ADHD-like behavior, because they literally consume, go check your screen time right now, you literally consume 2 to 4 hours of social media content a day, and it's not podcasts or anything useful. It's bullshit. You're watching shorts and stuff that isn't good for you, and it's conditioning your focus to be shit. So what you need to do before we move on is you need to literally cut back on that. I just need you to tell yourself manually, you need to manually override your behavior and tell yourself that watching shorts is not fun. You sit there with a brain, your head feels like it's packed with sand, and you just watch the time go away and you feel like shit. You actually need to use a little bit of negative energy when it comes to addictions like this, because look, listen to me now, right? Because this is important. I want you to imagine a river, for example. You're essentially a leaf in the river at the moment, and the river just washes you whichever way the current's going. So if you feel motivated to eat junk food, to scroll on content, that kind of stuff, the river is just going to wash you towards that. What you need to actually do is exercise manual override. You need to manually control yourself and use discipline. Otherwise, you're just going to be washed towards whatever modern digital addictions push you towards, right? That's just what happens. So what I need you to do is use a little bit of negative energy, and I need you to use a little bit of future sight. And I want you to imagine yourself as a 90-year-old on your deathbed. Are you going to be happy that you wasted years and years on content and you didn't actually be the most hyper-capable, productive, inspiring version of yourself? Because I know for me, I hear about that because I researched this stuff. I hear about the biggest regret of dying old people is that they didn't do the stuff that they actually wanted to because they gave into fear, or they gave into distraction, or they made bad decisions. I don't want that. That idea of being on my deathbed and not being Prime Minister of Australia, and not being, inspiring thousands of people, and not helping people with my content improve their lives, and maybe even not take their own life. The idea of me not having that effect, that sounds very extreme, but for me personally, this is me being authentic right now. The idea of me not having that impact on the world makes me physically sick. And when I feel physically sick, that emotion is so much stronger than fucking a Grand Theft Auto short trying to steal my attention and make me scroll through that. Like that negative emotion is stronger than the algorithm, and it always will be. So what I want you to tell yourself right now, I want you to pause the video and tell yourself that you are mortal, you will die one day, and you are not going to be happy if you look back and realize that you wasted so much time on rubbish. You are not going to be happy with that at all. So feel negative and use that to delete Instagram, to delete TikTok, to turn your phone to grayscale, to turn off notifications and all this other stuff that you can do, because this stuff is cancer for your focus. It is not good for you. Open a book. I read a non-fiction book. I'm pretty sure almost all those are fiction. There's some non-fiction down there. I can literally comment below or DM me on Instagram and I will give you book recommendations. I'll give you personalized advice. I'm happy to do that for you. Do not throw away your life on crap, all right? So that's content out of the way. I skipped diet, but we're gonna go to it now. Diet is another huge reason that so many people are distracted and they can't concentrate these days and they can't get into flow state. So what, excuse me. What I want you to understand is that the phrase "you are what you eat" is actually 100% true. You are what you eat, and if you eat like shit, not only are you going to be unhealthy, but your brain isn't going to function properly. A lot of people, when they think about unhealthy eating, they just think about getting fat or maybe dying early, getting heart disease, that kind of stuff. That stuff is all true. That will happen if you eat unhealthily. But another thing that will happen, and arguably, I was going to say arguably more important, I'm not going to say that, but also important, is that it impacts your focus and it actually impacts the way your brain works. So for example, a lot of people are familiar with the idea of brain fog or carb crashes, but if you don't know, it's basically, you can do this experiment if you want, but after you eat a lot of carbs, pasta, bread, a lot of rice, for example, especially if it's like a dirty meal, it's unhealthy. So think McDonald's, KFC, that kind of stuff, pizza. After you eat that, you just can't focus. I know I was at work, I think 2 weeks ago, and I just grabbed McDonald's because of no reason, to be honest, because I was a bitch and I gave in and cheated on my diet. I'll admit that to you. And I literally hadn't got McDonald's in ages. And I swear to God, because I've been eating so clean, like just meat, fruit, animal products, cutting out all the bad shit. When I ate McDonald's, I literally felt like I'd been hit by a fucking truck. Like I had a burger, I had chips, I had a McFlurry. Actually, I'm going to be an optimist and I'm not going to beat myself up over it. I'm just going to look on the bright side and say that was a productivity experiment. Maybe that's coping, it kind of is, but I'm using it now, so it's useful, right? I had, all that. I think I had a sundae as well, or a drink. I don't even remember what I had because I fucking don't like McDonald's, so I don't know why I did it. But I ate that, and when I went back to work, I was like, fuck, I feel like I've been hit by a truck. I felt like slightly slightly clammy, slightly cold. I couldn't concentrate on stuff anywhere near as much. I still have very good concentration because, you know, I read books and stuff, but I felt like I'd been hit by a truck mentally. And I was just like, fuck, like if this is what I feel like as someone whose phone is on grayscale, as someone who, you know, doesn't scroll, as someone who reads books from like the year 1891, like who the fuck does this? I'm weird. Like who does that, right? This is what I feel like. Imagine what, I just thought about what the average person who sits on their break and scrolls feels like when it comes to their focus, and it just must be absolute shit. So what you got to understand is that your diet is impacting how you work. It's causing you to feel less motivated to exercise. It's causing you to be distracted when you study. So here are some actionable steps for you to improve your diet. The first piece of advice I'm going to give you is just to eat healthier. And 90% of healthy diet knowledge you already know. So a lot of people ask, you know, how do I eat healthy? What do I avoid? Complete bullshit. You're procrastinating, all right? Obviously there is advice I can give you, but 90% of diet advice you already know. You're just procrastinating and you're being lazy by asking what to do. Ask for advice after you've actually started doing stuff. So for example, you already know ice cream is bad for you. You already know alcohol, chips, smoking. You know all that stuff is bad for you. You know that lean meat is good for you. You know that fruit and vegetables are good for you. You know that eating more of that stuff is good for you. You know that eggs are good for you, right? You know what's good for you and you know what isn't. We can talk about high fructose corn syrup and you know, what's another one? We can talk about all kinds of ingredients in food, right? Like preservatives and emulsifiers and glucose stabilizers and all this other stuff. I don't know if that last one's a thing. I might have combined two different things on accident. But we can talk about all that after you've started taking steps to clean up your diet. So just the advice I give you for diet is exactly the same as I'd give you for organization. It's just to be 1% healthier, to give yourself one diet XP in this video game of life. So don't eat dessert for one extra meal. Some people have dessert after lunch. Just don't do that. Only have dessert after dinner. Or if you're already doing that, just try and eat a little bit healthier. Try not to snack. Try not to eat ice cream. Try not to drink every day of the week. Reduce it to one and then reduce it to once every 2 weeks. Me personally, I never drink. So don't tell me that you need to drink 3 times a week. You fucking don't, all right? That's a cope. As far as I'm concerned, if you drink more than twice a week, you're a fucking alcoholic at that point. Most people would hear that and think that's a bit extreme. You're an alcoholic. If you're taking drugs more than like alcohol is a drug, it makes you slow, it makes you lose control. There's a reason you can't drive after you've had two, depending on your country, you can't drive after you've had 1 to 3 drinks, right? It's a fucking drug. So if you do it more than twice a week, as far as I'm concerned, you're a drug addict. If you're doing it socially 3 or 4 times a week, you're a drug dealer. And your friends are probably more friends with a drug, with alcohol, than they are actually with you, which is really concerning and a big wake-up call a lot of people I've coached have. So just bear that in mind as well. But as far as some actual diet tips go, if you're listening to that and you're like, yeah, I kind of already eat clean, give me some actual advice. I'd recommend fasting, which means not eating for the first part of the day. You can do this for 30 minutes. You can do this for, you know, an hour if you want, just for the first hour, and have breakfast 1 hour later. Get some stuff done straight away. Or you can do this until 1 p.m. like I personally do at the moment because I'm doing a weight cut. So I don't eat for the first part of the day and it keeps me really sharp working. As far as the food you should eat, if you're going to eat carbs like bread, rice, oats, pasta, that kind of stuff, I'd recommend eating it towards the end of the day. Reason is because if you eat it at the start of the day, it's going to give you brain fog. If you eat it at the end of the day, it's not really a big deal because it's going to make you sleepy, which means you go to sleep anyway. So that's kind of okay. As far as the stuff that you should eat earlier in the day, generally high fat, high protein, healthy, and then low calorie as well is the best thing you can eat. You want it low calorie because if you're eating, nobody should be eating a really huge breakfast unless like you're on like vacation or it's a social thing or that kind of stuff. Don't be eating a huge breakfast. Don't be eating a breakfast of like cereal, like rainbow cereal, like kind of bullshit, because that's unhealthy for you. It's literally, you know, it's contributing to heart disease. It's destroying your focus. I can't believe they give that stuff to kids. It's terrible. I can't believe my parents let me eat that, you know, for, you know, 5 days a week when I was younger, because it's terrible for your focus, terrible for your health. So make sure the stuff you are eating, if you're going to eat earlier in the day, make it sure it's high protein or high fat. So things like eggs, meat, fish, nuts, avocado, fruits neither high protein nor high fat, but it's probably the best of the carbs because some people find they eat an orange and they actually feel productive. I think I said nuts. Dairy can be okay as well, yogurt and that kind of stuff. If you want to have a little bit of oats or a little bit of honey on it, I don't think that's a big deal because it's only a little bit and it's pretty healthy. But yeah, the high fat, high protein, low carb, low calorie, and healthy is the best meals to have at the start of the day. If you're gonna eat anything unhealthy, put it last thing because you're about to go to sleep anyway. That's what I recommend for diet. If you've got any questions, just comment below and I'll give you a hand. The final thing I will say for removing obstacles is we've got another slide as well, but the final thing for removing obstacles is a shutdown ritual. If you don't have a shutdown ritual, you will essentially burn out. So what a shutdown ritual is, it's essentially like closing a tab in your mind. If you imagine your brain is a computer with a bunch of tabs open, if you don't have a shutdown ritual, it's kind of like leaving all the tabs open, which it would cause a laptop to not run as efficiently, and that's what's going to happen for your brain. So don't just go from task to task switching. Don't go to the gym late at night. Don't do random shit like working on your laptop until like 10 p.m. and then going to bed straight away afterwards. Like, you need to actually have a ritual where you stop working and you do like a low dopamine relaxing task like reading or something before bed. I would highly recommend you reward yourself at the end of the day after you've been working hard, because it's just a nice thing to do. And you'll also find that you can find a reward that is neither bad for you nor non-productive. So for example, I like to read self-improvement. I don't have any self-improvement books here, I don't think, but I like to read self-improvement. At the end of the day, it's relaxing, helps me fall asleep. And if I just read, as much time as I have, anywhere from 15 minutes to maybe 2 hours, depending on the day, just like to sit down, read that, maybe have a cup of tea, or I don't really drink soft drink that much anymore, but like occasionally I might just have like one glass of ginger beer or something, because it's kind of relaxing, it's kind of nice. I mean, I don't even drink alcohol, so if I want to have like two glasses of ginger beer with ice in it and read a book, read like a nice leather-bound book for an hour or two, that's like a really nice way on a Sunday evening after I've been working hard, maybe smashed out 6 YouTube videos in one day. It's just a nice thing to do, right? Maybe you've caught up with some friends as well and you just want to go home and unwind. That kind of thing. It's just a really nice thing to have a shutdown ritual. So I recommend just ask yourself, what are you actually doing to end the day? Do you leave tabs open? Because that is important as well. So we're going to talk about productivity in a nutshell now, because if you've watched till this far, you're obviously very interested in productivity and that kind of thing. So I'd recommend you check out my main channel, because I've got a lot of gems there. And I've also got my course, my ebook and all that stuff as well. So definitely check that out. But as far as being your most productive self and bring your fucking A game when it comes to the gym or studying or anything like that, here is how productivity works, and you weren't taught this in school. Productivity is essentially lever times focus times consistency. Those are the only 3 things you need to be a more productive person. Forget, the 1,015 videos that you've watched and all this other random stuff, top 3 hacks to be productive. If it doesn't fit into this model, it's not going to help you. So the 3 things you need to be productive are lever. Lever just means the task, so how much ROI it has. For example, doing certain exercises activates a certain muscle group more than others. So for example, if you want to grow your calves, doing calf raises is more useful than doing bicep curls. That sounds like common sense, but you'd be surprised. In a lot of areas of your life, you're probably doing things inefficiently. So for example, if you're doing Duolingo exclusively to learn a language, that's a very low ROI task. It isn't particularly useful. Watching a video of people speaking with subtitles is a higher ROI task. Or speaking to a native speaker and you can like hold up stuff and they can tell you what it is, completely immersed in the language, that's a high ROI task. Just think about the task you're doing and do they actually get you your result quickly. If you're changing your profile picture, if you're adding random links and changing your description in your channel banner for YouTube, those are all very low ROI, low return on investment tasks. The single biggest task for YouTube is obviously recording and uploading videos. So I want you just to ask yourself, go through each of your goals and ask yourself, what is the $1,000 task? If I could only do 1 hour of work a week on this, or I'd get shot in the head, which task would I do? Because I tell you right now, if you could do 1 hour a week in the gym, you would not waste that 1 hour watching YouTube shorts and, reading Jeff Nippard's book. Not to shit on it, it is a good book, but you wouldn't do any of that. You would literally just go gym. So make sure you're doing that thing first and foremost, then you can add the other side tasks on top of that if you want. If you only had 1 hour a week to work on your YouTube channel to get it to grow, you would just record a video. You wouldn't waste time researching stuff. You wouldn't change your fucking profile picture. You would just record the video. So bear that in mind. Always attack the highest ROI, highest lever task at all. Imagine like a big lever lifting a stone. You want the best possible one, all right? So make sure you're using the best possible thing. That's going to improve your productivity. The second thing is focus. We've kind of talked about in this video. Obviously, if you're task switching, you've eaten a bunch of carbs, you're mind wandering, you're not concentrated, you've got notifications going off, you're in a crowded environment, people like asking you questions and shit, you're not going to concentrate. If you're scrolling through TikTok and getting distracted in the middle of the workout, drawing it out, killing your momentum, you're just not going to make as much progress. So focus is important. Focus, staying in flow state is very, very important. You could almost replace focus with flow state here. Flow state is kind of like the epitome of focus, because obviously this is an equation and equations can have zeros in them. So I put focus instead of flow state. Flow state would be the optimal focus, but it could also, you know, if you're an idiot, it could be brain fog or something like that instead. You know what I mean, right? An equation can have a zero or a big number. So flow state would be the big number here. Like brain fog and shit would be the small number. And the third thing is consistency. A lot of people make the mistake of, you know, they get really, really into a habit for 1 week and then just drops off because they don't organize it. They, you know, are relying on sort of motivation, that kind of stuff. And that's just not going to work. So the reason I'm as strong as I am and the reason I'm, you know, I think 74 kilos at the moment, pretty strong, pretty good shape for a natural lifter, nothing crazy, but I'm in good shape, is because I've been going to the gym for 4 years. When I first started, there were guys bigger than me, guys leaner than me, who, you know, ate junk food and they were less healthy than me, and that was kind of annoying. Now they're not, because I'm consistent and they weren't. It's because they drink and I don't. So I've been consistent in the gym for a while, been consistent in YouTube for a year, not got, you know, the best results on YouTube, but I'm working on it. I'm putting more effort in now. You know, I've been consistent in language learning. Consistency will kill your competition. You know, obviously you're competing against yourself. Consistency will kill, you know, procrastination and bad results and that kind of stuff. So consistency just means how frequently you're doing a habit. It's okay to take, you know, days off and weeks off and even months off if you need a big break for burnout and that kind of stuff. But overall, if you do a habit more over time and you don't quit stuff, it's very, very difficult to not be good at. I've never seen anyone want to become good at chess and play chess 2-3 times a week every day for 5 years and not be good at chess. Like imagine, like I'm probably better than average at chess, not fucking good at it at all, but like better than average. Imagine if I had to play against someone who just played 2 or 3 games of chess every week for the last 10 years. They'd fucking smoke me, even if they didn't watch any YouTube videos on it. They'd just destroy me because they'd been consistent in the habit. So consistency is very important. What you've got to understand is just higher productivity essentially means more and faster results. So you should be optimizing for productivity and paying attention to everything in this video. A final equation I will give you is work ethic equals results over time. So the more results you get per unit of time, that's just what happens when you have a better work ethic, by applying all of these principles and by getting into flow state. So I'll have timestamps and links in the description for everything we've talked about. Guys, leave a comment with help, add me on Instagram and DM me if you need any help with anything. Check out the video on the screen. Make sure to hit the subscribe button. It's really, really rewarding for me to put in, you know, I've just put in, as you can see, almost 50 minutes, 3/4 of an hour of effort into helping you guys. Never mind me making this video and, you know, buying all the equipment I need to record it and, you know, doing the research for it and just like living a very purposeful life to help you guys. I'd really appreciate if you dropped a subscribe down below. That'd be really, really good for me. I'd appreciate that. But yeah, thank you for watching. Don't let them win.